What's up, Sunny Gyms? It's your boy GmanLives here, and I'm taking some time out of my daily schedule of fighting off crocodiles and punching kangaroos to tell you about a cool looking game called Proteus that you need to go on back on Kickstarter right now. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer, I wasn't paid to make this video or anything. I backed it on Kickstarter last week, and then I was just asked by the devs if I wanted to play it in its current state. And after spending a bit of time playing it, and because I like to support indie devs, it was something that I thought deserved a bit more exposure. Especially since indie devs are kind of like the last bastion of creativity in the gaming industry, especially for first-person shooters. So, what's Prodeus? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Proteus is another in a long line of games coming out that are something of a throwback to the golden age of first-person shooters. A bit of a pastiche of shooting games from the mid to late 90s, but with an art style and movement controls more reminiscent of something from the mid to late 2000s. There's no weapon limit, there's projectile enemies, and you can move blisteringly fast, but then there's also more modern mechanics like weapon reloading and iron sights. Developed by Mike and Jason, which is a pretty accurate title because I think the dev team is just two guys at this point. Kinda feels like a highly polished Doom mod with a Doom 2016 aesthetic. With the kind of gore you'd see in Project Brutality mixed with the over-the-top weapon and particle effects from something like the Fear series. Top it all off with a dynamic soundtrack by my boy Andrew Holsholt, and you've got a tight little package. And it's good, it's pretty damn good. There's no kind of story in the game at the moment, not that it really matters, but the whole goal of the game is just to collect all the keys, explore a complex and non-linear map, and then just find your way to the exit portal. You start off with nothing but your bare hands, which isn't all that effective, but soon after that you get your hands on a pistol. After that, you expectedly get the shotgun, and in true throwback FPS fashion, there's also a chain gun and a rocket launcher. I'm assuming the other guns we're going to get involve some kind of plasma rifle, and then there's going to be some kind of BFG weapon later on. Not that I've got anything against that formula, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's also an auto map, but unlike most other auto maps where it was simply a 2D overlay, this one is fully 3D, allowing you to fly around the entire level and see it from a zoomed out perspective, which is going to make secret hunting a lot easier. But what really makes Proteus stand out is two things. First off, there's the visuals, which are going for that purposefully old and pixelated look you'd get in the kind of game that you could only run through MS-DOS. A lot of modern games with this basic visual style often use that style to mask a lack of talent or effort put into modelling. Proteus though doesn't have this problem, and it's a great looking game technically and artistically. Textures and modelling of guns looks really awesome, and the animation for enemies looks great too. Like I said before, it has a bit of a Doom 2016 aesthetic with the designs of the enemies behaving and looking similar to the zombies, the shotgunners, the imps and the pinky demons. Oh, and then there's a big giant floating testicle thing that looks like the cacodemons. But I mean, if you're gonna steal from the best, right? But the real selling point is the violence. My god, the violence. It's just so good. This is where the Project Brutality and the Brutaldom influences come across, and it's almost comical at times just how gory everything can be. All of the best old school shooters just had ridiculous amounts of violence, games like Duke Nukem 3D, Blood, Painkiller and Serious Sam. And that's something that Proteus carries across too. Even from something as basic as using your fists, you'll notice how easy it is to decorate the environment with blood and guts. Once you get your hands on the rocket launcher, it gets even more ludicrous. And the blood's going to stay on the map permanently, which is a nice touch. You can blow off someone's legs or their head, or just take a chunk out of their torso, and it just looks awesome. When things get really gory, you'll even notice the player models being covered in blood too, which reminded me a bit of Shadow Warrior. And of course, what would a retro-styled FPS be without exploding barrels? This carries across to the particle effects when firing weapons with these giant sparks and ricochets that looks like someone set off a bunch of fireworks. And the way the weapons cause the screen to shake slightly when firing gives everything this real sense of weight and power. I always reckon you can tell within 10 seconds of shooting something in a shooting game if it's going to be any good. And within 10 seconds, Proteus just felt really good. And that didn't really change in the next 2 hours I spent replaying it either. Then of course there's Andrew's music. Now this is the guy who worked on Quake Champions, Medieval and recently Dusk as well. The soundtrack for Dusk I look at being as the video game equivalent of Pink Floyd's The Wall. He seems to be the go-to guy for doing the music for any first-person shooter that's worth a damn these days. And although there's very little to go off here because there's only a handful of tracks, I still gotta say, damn good stuff. Now, I still feel like I need to give a bit of constructive criticism, instead of just blindly tonguing the game's asshole, so here it is. For starters, as neat as the heads-up display is, it is kind of constricting, with it trying to replicate the player's helmet, and it limits my visibility a fair bit. Aside from that, I think the enemies with the shotguns feel like they can survive one shot too many. The chain gun runs out of ammo too quickly, and all of the explosions gave me an erection, but I mean look, that last one ain't all that bad, unless it happens in public. Also, I don't like that I can't play the whole thing right now and that I have to wait for them to finish it. I mean, that's kind of the downside to being able to play games early like this, is that I get to play them before most people, which is cool, but on the other hand, I have to wait the longest to play the final product, which sucks. At the moment, Proteus is really fun to play, and even in this current state, there's just so much potential here. Like, the shooting is really solid, but what's really going to make this thing succeed, I think, is if they can manage to make the whole thing compelling over time. If it's just going to be a couple of dozen levels of searching for keycards, well, that's going to get boring really quickly. And the level design is going to make or break this thing in the long run. And for God's sake, please don't go the procedurally generated route either. If they can mix things up a bit with the level design and some of the weapon types, well, that's what's really going to make this thing stand out above the rest. I have been burned in the past by supporting Kickstarters. The last time was when I backed Strafe, which turned out to be a bigger disappointment than your mum was.
Schwacked.
But I do have a pretty good feeling about Proteus, and the fact that it's being spearheaded by two guys who know what the hell they're doing and have been around the industry a fair while makes me feel a lot more confident. I think at the moment there's still a bit of time left on their Kickstarter, so if you like what you're seeing in the video, well, head over there, throw some money their way, and support these guys. If you do, you'll wake up tomorrow morning showered in good fortune. If you don't, you'll wake up showered in sheep shit. Say that 5 times fast. If there's an indie game in the works that lets me fire a chain gun so quickly that I get drenched in the blood of my enemies and I don't support it, am I even allowed to call myself a boomer?